Okay. So we go to our initiative task outline. I move to hold on law enforcement until we actually get to meet and talk with Sean at HRC.
I second that. That was kind of our preliminary discussion before the meeting started, that we might be a little premature on today's meeting, on at least in regards to that, and we should talk about that
Yeah,
after the presentation at the next HRC meeting.
correct. So I move. Is that what we do? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll second that motion,
Okay.
Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Oh, I can't do anything, right? Sorry. I'm just supposed to facilitate it. The next one is the local election process. We had what I think was a very good presentation from Ian Ridgway. And out of that, I know for me, I heard some things that the intergroup might be able to help with in regards to helping maybe connect the jail and other organizations with putting out more marketing that felons can vote, advocating for the bilingual ballots, free postage, if that's a possibility, moving a box that represents the voting register, perhaps in a neighborhood that doesn't have a voting site, and or working to get a voting site there. I think the Lincoln Center seems to be a good location. I mean, if it's a possibility. Yeah. I heard those kind of things out of his presentation.
I agree, Sonia. I think we can't really control what the Board of Elections do. We can obviously say, hey, here are some things that we would like to see happen, and then I think as we focus on what we can advise the council and the mayor, would be things like you talked about, which is making sure that we have access to, if I guess Patrick just said that the Court of Appeals just ruled that you can have more than one box.
Yeah, I don't know if it was. I don't think it was the appeals court. I think it was
just a local court. And now it's up on appeal.
In Columbus, now it's up on appeal.
Okay, that's the last I had heard. So if there, I think we can recommend to the city that they permit, boxes, whether that's downtown at Lincoln Center, at parks, I don't know, whatever would make the most sense to have accessible voting.
But that's really controlled by the Ohio Secretary of State. That's not anything we can do.
No, but we can say that the city should allow that to happen. We can control that.
No, the city can't.
We can't prohibit.
You can't prohibit
unless it's in the right of way. But then that's just a normal thing, and that's a safety issue.
Right, and then the other thing that we could do is recommend to the board that, or to the election board, that they look at locations within the city, like you said, and that's going to be between them and the churches, the Lincoln Center, whatever those entities are, because I do think there's some. Do you get paid? But you have to provide security.
For what?
No, you don't have to provide security.
Okay, we just have to provide access to the building.
Just have to provide access to the building.
But they've been trying to get them out of schools and away from where kids are.
Yeah.
Well, schools and high traffic areas, because that creates a lot of confusion, a lot of cross traffic.
Again, they have a checklist of where they're allowed to put them. They have a whole checklist of everything that has to be provided.
These are just recommendations to you, Mayor. That's what we're supposed to do. So
well, there used to be a poll office at Richards Chapel United Methodist Church. They actually did vote there.
They used to decentralize the precinct voting, and then they had to consolidate, in large part because they just can't get poll workers.
Yeah.
So, but again, remember, our job is to simply just make recommendations and then see where they go. So I agree with you, Sonia. I think that there were some things that we could present as proposed recommendations, and that
And so
would
will you
fulfill our
guys,
goal.
how will you present that? Will you send me an email or a letter?
I think the ideal is at the end, we'll continue to go through these different committee meetings, and then we'll consolidate a list of, is Marvin on there?
Yeah.
Marvin is probably better to answer this than me, but how I would envision us doing it is put together a list of initiatives on various and sundry things, narrow them down to 4 to 6 areas, and present that in one joint report or one annual report of the HRC to the mayor, and then kind of start to see how they get implemented, and then work on a basis to see where we go from there. But I think the idea is to concentrate really strongly on about 4 or 6 initiatives right now, get those out to the mayor and get that done, and then see how things go. At least that's how I mean, I think that was the consensus of
Yes, it is.
the last time. Did I say that okay, Marvin?
That was perfect. Thank you.
So that's how I think so I think what we would do, Mayor, is we'll eventually have a list that we will present to you, and then probably Marvin or Marvin and Sherry or Marvin and Sonia or somebody can come and talk to council about the experience and where we are, or whoever wants to come. I don't care. But
So what I hear is that this election cycle, yeah, we're
I
not,
think.
I don't know that we can do
Yeah.
much. I mean, they've already started voting.
right. Yeah,
But
I didn't know if that's what you were asking, if there's something that needs to be, yeah, I don't see us being able to at this point. And again, we're advising the city.
Right.
We could, like you said, we can make some recommendations that
And
they
we
can pass on,
talk to
but
the
we
Board of
can't.
Elections, but really,
Judging by the presentation
you
that
make
Mr.
decisions
Ridgway gave,
locally for me.
I think the things that we're working on right now are things that Ian was actually open to doing. So even I think the recommendations will be welcomed.
Yeah, so I think that's fine, and we can put together that list. So, and then I think the only other thing that we had on our initiatives was the budget, and I don't know if that's been distributed. Did you ever distribute that to people if they wanted it?
The whole city budget,
I don't know. That's what it said on here.
900 pages of it.
If people want it, I don't care.
Well, I was on the list.
The 2020 budget, in fact, Marvin, we were going to consult with you. John seems to think that you had something that we haven't written down of why we were asking for the budget. So I'm glad you're actually on this.
I thought that we were asking for, money to try to get different types of publications that we had agreed on. So like with all the committees, there's, a move to bring awareness to certain things that we're doing, try to path in people to these groups that we're trying to connect them to, just to make sure things are running smoothly. And so we had talked about there being like an annual, I guess like a town hall meeting that we would have, just to talk about what the HRC is and how it operates. And we know that we have these meetings every 2 weeks, so that could suffice, but we wanted to maybe do some publications to bring more people into it, to let them know that they are being supported by this group and why this group is here, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think additionally, just to try to contact students in schools. So we would do that through flyers. And so not a large budget, but just enough money to be able to do some things to bring awareness to what we're doing and how we're trying to help.
That was discussed on Community Relations Committee.
Yes, it was.
Yes, Intergroup Relationships Advisory Committee. So those initiatives which you have now in your packet, those are the ones Marvin wrote in the beginning from his initiative list. and you have not changed it. And then Sonia mentioned that you were all confused what you wanted to deal with the budget. I think you were just going to look into the Troy City budget and kind of read through it to see how it looks. That's what I remember.
Right,
But-
well, that,
So
the
it's
bullet,
two different things, I think.
Yeah.
yeah,
But what Marvin is saying, he was also working on a budget for committees and commissions, which was discussed on Community Relations Committee.
So Marvin,
Yeah.
there are two different things here. The reason that I was on the presentation list was really just to talk about how we develop the overall budget,
Okay.
how that process works, what some of the key line items are, such as police and fire. And then there is the annual request that every department makes as we develop the overall budget and send it to council. The latter is, and when you're talking about a relatively small amount for publications and such, isn't really a big issue. I don't know if you had to ballpark a number, are you talking about $10,000 a year?
Yeah. I wouldn't think it would be anything more than that.
Yeah, and this, not to give you a spoiler alert, because I could mesmerize you guys for hours at a meeting in the future.
It's okay.
But the way we do our budget is at the fund level, and it gives us some flexibility. So let's say we put $10,000 into the HRC's set of budgets in the general fund and allocate that and have the council kind of bless that as part of the general fund. If it's less than 10,000 because you only spent 8,000, so be it. If it's a little bit more, we have other line items that we can draw from. For example, if there are some things that you want to do this year, you don't have a budget for it technically, but we do have funds in some general government accounts. And as long as they don't exceed a statutory limit where I have to go to council and do bidding and all that other stuff, it's relatively easy. We're working on a draft brochure, for example. If at your request, I'm not sure which committee, I lose track of which committee had asked for it, but we're going to talk about that. It's very possible that you're going to want to have us reproduce a lot of those by the end of the year. And so we'll figure out how to pay for the paper and the printing and the final typesetting if we don't do that final work in-house. So, I mean, we've got flexibility there, and if you've just got a ballpark number that you want us to include in the budget, I don't think that needs to take a lot of your time, unless you had, a super huge request, which doesn't sound like that's what we're talking about.
I don't think you would exceed $10,000. Do you, Marvin, Sonia, John, Loretta?
No.
Do you, Marvin? You
A
think
year?
that's
Something.
we works?
No, I don't think we will. We had talked about some training initiatives, and those get kind of pricey, but I still don't think that we would run over the $10,000 budget. I think it's very small still.
Yeah, and when you talk about things like training, if it's training a city staff, normally when we do training, we allocate that and account for it in each budget.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Each department.
Police sends 40 officers, 40 times whatever it costs per officer, that's part of their training budget. So that way it doesn't eat into HRC's budget allocation. That's just kind of a creative accounting that we do to keep everybody accountable.
Perfect.
So, but I don't see any need for us to explore the budget. I mean, I don't know. I'm the city of person, so maybe I shouldn't be the one, but you're welcome to read it. I mean, I said last time, it's pretty boring. It's on the website, isn't it?
Yeah, it is on the website. I read the budget from 2019, but I didn't see 2020.
Yeah. So I don't see, I mean, I think from this committee, we should focus. I mean, I agree with Sonia. I think we've got a little bit of, I thought the local election process was very good and handled well with Ian. And I think after the next HRC, we'll be able to look at more of the law enforcement / city services aspect of it and narrow down some focuses there. And really, I think that's kind of what our intergroup one should be doing.
We, just to add, if I think if we're done with the discussion on budget, we had talked with Sean about having some meetings at the police department, and I know that there are some background checks that need to take place in order for that to happen. So, is that still a possibility? I think that would be a really good thing.
Well, it would be, except that the only place to meet is in the basement.
Uh-huh.
And after hours, there's nobody to let people in and out. And since these have to be public meetings, it might be a little difficult. Now, it's one thing to hold a meeting there, which would create some difficulties, but if the HRC wanted to take a tour of the facility, that's different, because then, you don't have to let the public in, you just have to let them know that you're doing a tour. So you don't talk about city, you don't collaborate and discuss and debate, but you're just going through a tour and you're asking questions and you're seeing how the operations work. That's certainly no problem whatsoever. The holding of a public meeting there might be difficult because you can't even get on the elevator without having an access code to get off of the first floor because it's such a secure building.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we'll talk with him about that. We were talking and he was saying that he would even like us to do some ride-alongs as well, just to talk with the police officers and see how they're doing their job and things like that. And so he's really open to doing some of those things. So I think that we should talk about that and try to do that as a as a group if there's not any issues that would not
Hey,
allow.
Mark, I have a question. Troy Leadership, we were able to go and take a tour and sit in the conference room and have a nice presentation. So maybe if we talk to the chamber of how they facilitated that with the Troy Police Department, that it could, it's already created.
Well, Sonia, the big difference is that the Leadership Troy is not a public meeting.
Oh, gotcha. He's right for that.
Yep.
That is true.
So you're pretty limited to just taking the tour as a group?
Which I think is all you want to, really what you're getting the benefit out of. And that's no problem whatsoever.
Okay.
And Marvin, this question, I have a proposal that I want to do for community, but is the budget here and there? Is this where the budget is going to land? Because I'd like to consider like maybe some historical funds, but I was going to pose that in the community meeting.
I think the budget would be in that other committee. I think the reason budget was on here was there were some discussions about the city budget, not the HRC budget. And I think those have sort of rectified themselves just by virtue of people looking into the budget and seeing the process and how things are funded.
Yeah, the bullet points under budget, when we listed that, was city budget and list of all tax and infrastructure, line item budget for the city of Troy, and taxes paid, statute, city codes and policies and governing. So that's how what fell, which I would need that broken out a little bit more. I don't understand all that language, but so there's nothing there that we really need to delve into.
From the first meeting, I think there was some concerns about how things got budgeted and how things, and I think, sort of like when we talked about felons voting, as we talked it through and we became aware of more information, I think people became aware that the budget's kind of wide open and it's open to, it's not wide open, it's readily available, I guess is a better term, for people to look at and how it's compiled and we talked about it being a statutory city, if you guys remember that, and back when the.
Yeah, I remember.
So I don't know that we can really do much budget wise. I don't want to step on the toes of the committee, but I really think, number one, the law enforcement is really where we need to direct our attentions going forward. And I think we need to really explore that after we have input. I'm glad to hear, Marvin, what you're saying, that the city's been very receptive to, letting ride-alongs occur. I guess they could do that. Can you do that? Patrick's nodding his head. And touring, and I think, hopefully there's some open communication with tomorrow, or on, when is that? Next Wednesday? The 1st, October 1st, a week from Thursday.
Mr. Chair, is there any specific way you would like me to dictate initiative 3 after conversation? Make sure I get it right.
I do have another question about section 3. I sent an email over to, just today, I sent an email to, give me a second.
Grant?
Yes, thank you. I sent an email to Grant because we were looking at all the 6 city ordinances for Troy and how to submit information to the mayor on behalf of requesting a city ordinance change or an amendment or an addition. So I'm in the process of waiting on information back from him, but I think since we're all in the room, there was some discussion on, let's see, on trying to submit an ordinance for discrimination and protected classes, and also hate speech, right, or threatening. So we wanted to put something together. Actually, I've already put it together, but I just wanted to make sure that the formatting of it is correct. So if you all have any input on how that needs to be received, or if you'd like me to send it to you first, then we can discuss it after. I'm very open to that. Still
That's
not.
also Community Relations Committee. I don't know, Mr. Keller, if you are up to speak on that, but Marvin was working on an ordinance. I was discussing a Community Relations Committee, so I don't know if you want to have a discussion here or wait for the committee.
Well, it kind of goes
You're
sort
just asking a
of.
procedural question, Marvin, right?
I'm sorry.
You're asking a procedural question.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and so, Salome, did Grant get that email? You sent that to Grant and copied Salome?
I don't think I copied Salome, but I can forward it.
So what Grant will do is he'll take a look at it.
Oh, I did copy Salome.
I know he had already had a heads up because you had been working on a draft through the Google Drive. And so he can research that kind of stuff and see what's out there. And as far as formatting, it's really nothing formal when it comes from commissions or boards or even individual council members. We have a standard format that Grant uses when he puts together proposed ordinances or resolutions. So, you don't have to worry about having it in the perfect format.
Okay.
You just need to describe what you'd like the council to consider in as much detail as possible. And then there'll probably be some back and forth between you and Grant to get it right. And he can share his legal opinion and what might work better than other language. So it's a pretty fluid process.
And I would think that would want to come from the whole committee as a whole, right? I mean, if we're going to eventually propose
Right.
some statutory or ordinance or resolution. So no,
I agree, the committee as a whole, but that was a discussion. That discussion, Marvin, we were having in the Community Relations Committee initially about creating that policy. Yeah.
So I apologize. Do I leave initiative 3? Do I take it out? Am I rewording it? I just want to make sure that I get the notes correct.
I think I would move at this time that initiative 3 be moved toward a sort of to a holding pattern until we determine if there's any necessity to explore further the budgetary process of the city.
Right.
I think number 2, obviously, we can talk about in further detail, and I think we got a lot of input to that. And I would move that 1, we postpone doing anything on until after we get more input from law enforcement. And I do like the idea of a tour and some more personal one-on-one time with the police department as well. So I think that we would move forward with that. That would be kind of my ideas. I think we can narrow down with 1 or 2 good local election process recommendations, and hopefully we get a lot of good interactive responses to 1 after the HRC meeting of the whole on October 1st.
The rest of the committee, your thoughts?
I agree.
Oh, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in agreement as well. Sorry, John.
I do have one question, and I appreciate the mayor and the safety service director being here. As I continue to come back to our duties. So the duties of this committee is to study the problems of intergroup relationships, revolving around race, physical, mental handicaps, poverty, and all that stuff. So my question to you two, are there any problems, because we're to advise you, are there any problems that have been brought to your attention you would like for us to study? Or are there problems out there lingering that this committee could start to study and advise you in? Because that seems to me the main focus of this particular committee.
To identify,
Probably our 2 biggest questions at this point involve recruitment practices. Basically, where do we recruit to start to get some interest in getting applicants? You've heard about our civil service process. You've heard about how we try to recruit. We are constantly looking at different ideas. Should we be, a lot of companies, they go down to the junior high school level now to try to start that interest, to get kids started thinking about alternative careers such as with law enforcement and fire and EMS. The other one are our initiatives when it involves state of Ohio support. The idea we've been exploring alternatives, alternative solutions related to body cams, for example. We don't have them now. We do have the in-car cameras. Those in-car cameras are beyond end of life. Now is a good time to be looking at, and we really already have, but because there are really only 3 or 4 different solutions out there, but integrating our body cameras with our in-car forward videoing and backseat video camming cameras in the cruisers and how they integrate, where the state could come get involved and where we might need some advocacy support is related to the storage and the centralization of that data. There's been some talk about the state underwriting those kind of solutions, so there's a statewide database of all that information. It's early yet, but it's something to keep our eye on. It does not hinder our ability or desire to fund a system, but storage and ongoing maintenance, those are always much, a much higher percentage of the overall lifetime costs of the investment than the initial cameras. So those are a couple of related items.
Okay.
Well, I think there's other things though, likewise, PT. I think we can look at, what sort of amenities does the city have that attract or retain employees? We've talked about that. We've talked about, we fund the Lincoln Center, and we've talked about whether there can be some historical, I don't know what you would, integration, for lack of a better term, at the Lincoln Center, so that, we can have that minority presence known, or that I know there was some discussion with Shane about that. And I think that's the other part that we really have to look at, is making sure that we recruit, but that we also have the amenities to retain really all employees, but that we're not, that we're looking at to make sure that that's done in an equitable fashion.
So, we keep hearing recruitment and employment, recruitment and quality of life, living here, retention here in Troy. Why doesn't the intergroup look at possibly overall recruitment or solutions to recruitment? Because they all look a little bit different. The police have an accreditation that they have to seek to find. So, some people think it's harder to find minorities if you expect this level of accreditation, or if the school, maybe getting them to see, looking at HBU schools, maybe we need to connect HBU schools and universities with our city as a whole.
Yes.
And create that bridge. It's not necessarily forcing people to change their system, but providing a bridge that's so relevant that society knows that we need more than a well-educated teacher. We need a well-educated teacher that reflects the classroom. So why don't we as intergroups look at that and focus on being that bridge? That's something very attainable, to where we can be that link. And maybe when you're talking about publications, Marvin, it's just providing the marketing as well, that we are that bridge. So minorities could come to us to find careers as well, because we could connect them too.
Or we could have an outreach policy. And I think you're absolutely right. So, Troy is a great city. It's somewhat diverse. It's not like San Francisco, but it's very diverse, and very good housing market, very good schools. There's lots of reasons to come live here. So I'm sure that if we connect it with the right individuals and the right systems, we could hopefully help the recruiting processes for all of our city establishments involved.
Exactly, I agree.
And I think we'll learn, because from the economic one that we both are on, I think once we hear more from the Development Council and the Chamber about things, but I do think that those are again, keep in mind, this is city focused. So we do help fund the Development Council. We do help fund the Lincoln Center. We do help fund the Chamber of Commerce. So those are things that we would have at least tentacles out in. But like the schools, we're going to have to rely. We can obviously send them anything that we want, but the problem we're going to run into is, if the school board looks at us and says we don't really care, there's not much we can.
Hey Todd, what if we came up with a minority job fair, and we went to our partners, like you just said, through the chamber, housed at the Lincoln Center, and we just invite entities? We don't have to force people, but if we say, hey, we have a pool of educated minorities that want jobs, come on, let's face it, you would be crazy not to want to be a part of it if your main issue is recruitment.
Yeah, and if I can clarify a couple of things. First of all, like Sonia, you and I have talked that there are two cautions here. First of all, when I answered John's question I'm not, I'm kind of thinking of maybe the overall HRC and not just this committee, because as an interrelationship committee, fostering the partnerships probably is the most important part of this committee. When it comes to the recruitment techniques, it's probably getting into the employment committee. And I know there's overlap, and I know there's a lot of cross membership on the committees. And so that goes back to trying to foster relationships with the election board, with the sheriff, and the jails, and with the schools in particular. The other key, though, the real caution is, Sonia, I know you didn't quite mean it this way. We want the HRC to be the most effective advisor to the city by leveraging things that are already either being thought of or going on, and making them better, making them more inclusive, adding new ideas. So, for example, your idea about a job fair, that is something that they are coming up with those all the time. So what they be in the chamber, specific businesses will have job fairs. So trying to, again, foster those partnerships and make those better by reaching out to different groups that they may not even know about, but the HRC has and the members have connections to make those job fairs more inclusive, bigger and better, thinking
Exactly.
outside the
That's
box.
what I meant. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to actually reinvent the job fair, but being intentional about inviting schools with diversity, like just being that bridge to help. You're right. All right. So that was the last initiative that we had. Is there anything else?
I appreciate that clarification of fostering our relationships. That's helpful to me as I keep trying to wrap my head around what we've really been tasked to do. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it does make the job a lot easier.
I've been struggling with that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, so again, we can look at the upcoming job fairs at a later date, or we could just table what we have and come back and kind of finish which probably makes sense for tonight. Anyone's final thoughts?
I think we've probably accomplished what we can get through tonight. We need to get the police and the fire opportunity this time. Did you send the chamber thing to everybody, the U.S. chamber?
Yep.
So you should all look at the U.S. chamber thing that Salome sent out too. That was pretty good for the intergroup committee.
So for our next meeting, it looks like October 5th has been taken by the education group. If we're to stay to Mondays, the 19th is open. And that would be well after our HRC meeting. Well, we'd be into our second meeting.
That's fine. I'll have council again, so we can do it at 6. I know the mayor and Patrick and I will have to leave. We actually have to leave in about the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Wednesday's open too, the 14th, if you wanted to stay.
That will not work for me.
Okay, got you.
The 21st would.
21st? 21st would work for me too.
I'll be out of town, but I can always check on Zoom, or you guys can.
You can also change the day, Thursday if it works, or you can do 5, or you can do 5:30 on 19th.
Be 5:30 on that Monday.
Are we going back to the 19th, 5:30? Is that what I'm hearing?
I can do 5:30 on the 19th, but I don't think. Can you do the 19th, John?
19th works for me,
Oh.
yeah.
19th, not the 14th.
Everyone else on the team, does that work, Ms. Phillips?
Sure does.
Good.
Okay, and we have it at 5:30 on the 19th at the senior center or via Zoom.
Yep.
All right. So then I move to adjourn the meeting unless there's any thoughts from anybody. I can't see if anybody's there.
We all left.
No one's here.
Okay, so I move
Straight
to
outside.
A second.
all in favor.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Great. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.